The exotic matter spread through the Vorth star like poison in a living body. Captain Han Ji-woo watched from the bridge of the Phantom as the star that had shone for 4 billion years began to die. The nuclear fires that powered an entire civilization flickered and dimmed as alien physics tore apart the stellar core. On Vorth Prime, 50 million aliens looked up at their sun with growing terror. The yellow light that had never changed in all of recorded history was now flashing red and orange. Solar flares erupted from the surface, sending waves of deadly radiation across the system fleet. Admiral Zek Morvan of the Vorth Empire stood in his command center watching his scientists struggle to understand what was happening to their star. Every instrument reading was impossible. Every theory failed to explain the collapse that was accelerating with each passing minute. "What did the humans do to our sun?" Admiral Morvan demanded from his chief scientist. But Dr. Hex Vorthak could only shake his head in confusion. "The readings suggest some kind of exotic matter is destabilizing the fusion reactions, but such technology should not exist." The Vorth military had spent centuries conquering other species and building their empire. They had destroyed dozens of civilizations without mercy, always confident in their superior technology. Now they faced a weapon they could not understand, deployed by a species they had dismissed as weak communication stations across the Vorth system, were broadcasting emergency evacuation orders, but there was nowhere to run. The explosion would consume everything within 10 light hours of the star planet's moons. Space stations and ships would all be vaporized in the stellar death. On the third planet of the system, a Vorth family gathered around their communication device, listening to the panicked reports from their homeworld. The father, Nek Vorthon, had served in the military that destroyed New Harmony, but he had never thought about the human families that died there. Now his own children, Zara and Klex, were asking him why the sky was getting brighter and why all the adults looked so scared. He tried to explain that their star was sick, but he did not understand what was happening, any more than they did. The evacuation ships that launched from Vorth Prime were too few and too slow. Most of the population could not even reach the spaceports before the traffic jams made travel impossible. 50 million beings faced death with the same helplessness that the humans of New Harmony had experienced. Dr. Nam Yu-jin monitored the stellar collapse from her station aboard the fleeing Phantom. The exotic matter had reached critical mass throughout the star's core. The fusion reactions were shutting down in a cascade failure that would lead to complete gravitational collapse within the hour. Captain Han Ji-woo felt no joy as he watched an entire civilization face extinction. The crew of the Phantom were professional soldiers who understood the terrible mathematics of war. The Vorth had killed 237 innocent humans, so billions of Vorth would die in response. The star's magnetic field began to collapse, sending electromagnetic pulses across the system. Every electronic device on every Vorth world went dead at the same moment. The aliens found themselves in darkness with no communication, no transportation, and no hope of escape. Lieutenant Colonel Oh-hai-1 treated the wounded members of her Marine squad as the Phantom raced toward the hyperspace jump point. 3 of her soldiers had died in the enemy attack, but their sacrifice had made the mission possible. The weapon was deployed and working exactly as designed. Fleet Admiral Zek Morvan watched his mighty space fleet die as the stellar electromagnetic pulse fried their computer systems. Warships that had conquered a dozen star systems became floating tombs, drifting helplessly as their crews suffocated in the darkness. The Vorth homeworld fell into chaos as the government collapsed and billions of aliens realized they were going to die. Riots broke out in the major cities as people fought for seats on the few remaining evacuation ships, but even those who escaped the planet could not escape the system communication officer Yoon Sang. Ho intercepted the final transmission from Vorth Command. It was a message directed at Earth, a desperate plea for mercy from Admiral Morvan himself. "We surrender. We will never attack human colonies. Again, please stop this weapon." But it was too late to stop what had been set in motion. The exotic matter had spread through the entire stellar core, and the gravitational collapse was accelerating beyond any possibility of reversal. The Vorth star would explode in less than 30 minutes. Captain Han Ji-woo ordered his communication officer to record a final message for Earth Command. "The stellar cascade generator has been successfully deployed. The Vorth system will be completely destroyed. The mission is accomplished. Justice has been served for New Harmony. The star began its final collapse as the Phantom jumped to hyperspace and escaped the system. In the space of 5 minutes, 4 billion years of stellar evolution was reversed. As the massive ball of plasma crushed itself into a point of infinite density, the explosion that followed lit up half the galaxy. Astronomers on 1,000 worlds would see the new star appear in their night sky and wonder what cosmic disaster had occurred. The shockwave traveled faster than light itself, carrying the news of humanity's revenge to every corner of known space. On Vorth Prime, the aliens had just enough time to see their sun expand to fill the entire sky before the planet was consumed. The blue and green world where 50 million beings had lived and loved became vapor in the stellar fire. Their cities, their art, their history, all disappeared in an instant. The other planets of the system followed quickly. Mars-sized worlds were swallowed like dust particles as the expanding ball of nuclear fire reached out with fingers of destruction. Every space station, every mining facility, every sign that the Vorth Empire had ever existed was erased from the universe fleet. Admiral Zek Morvan died with his crew aboard his flagship as the explosion reached them. His last thought was of the human colony his forces had destroyed. He finally understood what the humans felt when they watched their children burn. The stellar explosion continued for hours, consuming everything within the system and sending shockwaves through hyperspace that would be detected for years to come. When it was over, nothing remained but an expanding cloud of superheated gas and the memory of a civilization that had chosen genocide. News of the destruction spread through the galaxy like wildfire, carried by traders and explorers who had witnessed the new star's birth. Every alien species learned the same lesson that day. Humans might be peaceful, but they were not weak. Anyone who murdered human children would face the full fury of Earth's wrath. The Phantom limped back to Earth with its surviving crew heroes who had avenged New Harmony at the cost of an entire star system. Captain Hanjiwu broadcast a final message to the galaxy as his ship entered Earth space. The colony of New Harmony has been avenged. Let this be a warning to all who would harm innocent humans. On Earth, President Yoon Soo-jin stood before the United Nations and spoke to a silent assembly. The Vorth Empire chose to commit genocide against our people. They showed no mercy to our children, so we showed no mercy to theirs. This is not conquest or expansion. This is justice. The galaxy would remember the day a star died because humans had loved their children. The peaceful farmers and scientists of New Harmony were gone, but their sacrifice had taught the universe a lesson that would never be forgotten. Humanity would build colonies, explore new worlds, and extend friendship to all who would accept it, but those who chose to murder human families would learn what it meant to face a species that could kill stars themselves. The message was clear across the galaxy. Earth protects its own with absolute determination, and human vengeance knows no bounds whatsoever. Captain Han Ji-woo sat in the command chair of the Phantom as the ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vorth system. The journey had taken 2 weeks, but it felt like a lifetime. The crew had spent every hour preparing for this moment, knowing that failure meant the death of the human race. The Vorth system stretched out before them like a deadly maze of metal and energy. Their homeworld, Vorth Prime, glowed blue and green in the light of their yellow sun. Space stations the size of cities orbited the planet, connected by streams of ships carrying cargo and passengers. Engineer Nam Yu-jin worked frantically in the cargo bay, checking the stellar cascade generator for the 100th time. The exotic matter core was stable, but it required constant monitoring. One power fluctuation could cause the weapon to explode and vaporize the Phantom before they could complete their mission. The star itself was massive and bright, casting harsh light across the system. It had burned for billions of years, providing energy for the Vorth civilization. Now it would become the instrument of their destruction. The irony was not lost on Captain Hanji. Navigation Officer Kim Tae-young studied the enemy patrol patterns on his screens. Sir, we have 17 Vorth warships in the outer system and at least 40 more near their homeworld. Their technology is more advanced than ours, but our stealth systems should keep us hidden. Lieutenant Colonel Oh-hai-1 checked her weapons for the 10th time that hour. Her Marine squad was ready for anything, but she hoped they would not be needed. If the Vorth detected the Phantom before they could deploy the weapon, the mission would fail. and Earth would be defenseless. The ship moved, slowly through the outer system, dodging between asteroids and debris fields. Captain Han Ji-woo had to be careful not to get too close to any Vorth vessels. Their sensors might not see the Phantom, but they could still detect the ship if it came. Within a few kilometers, Dr. Nam Yu-jin called from the cargo bay. "Captain, the weapon is ready for deployment. We need to get within 50,000 kilometers of the star's surface. The exotic matter has to be released directly into the corona for the chain reaction to work properly." Pilot Lee Min-jae adjusted their course toward the system's center. The yellow star grew larger and brighter as they approached Hanji. Wu could feel the heat even through the ship's armor and shielding. They were flying into the heart of an alien solar system to destroy it from within. A Vorth patrol ship passed less than a kilometer away from the Phantom. The alien vessel was sleek and dangerous-looking, with weapons that could destroy the small human ship in seconds. Everyone on the bridge held their breath as the enemy scanner beam swept past them. "The stealth systems are holding," Kim Tae-young whispered as the patrol ship moved away. "We are still invisible to their sensors." Captain Han Ji-woo allowed himself a moment of relief, but he knew the hardest part was still ahead. They had to get much closer to the star, and that meant flying through the most heavily defended part of the system. The Vorth had built massive solar collection arrays around their star, huge metal structures that gathered energy and beamed it to their homeworld. The arrays were protected by automated defense platforms that would fire on anything that got too close. Communication Officer Yoon Sang-ho intercepted Vorth military transmissions as they flew deeper into the system. "Sir, they are discussing routine patrol schedules and cargo shipments. There is no indication that they know we are here." Dr. Nam Yu-jin joined the bridge crew to watch their final approach to the star. The exotic matter was contained in a special pod that would be ejected from the ship once they reached the target zone. The pod had its own propulsion system and would guide itself into the star's corona. Lieutenant Colonel Oh-hai-1 positioned her Marines at key points throughout the ship. If the Vorth boarded the Phantom, her soldiers would fight to the death to protect the weapon. They had trained for close combat in zero gravity and were ready for anything. The star loomed, enormous in front of them, filling the main view screen with blinding light. Captain Han Ji-woo ordered the screen to be filtered so they could see what they were doing. The surface of the star was a raging inferno of nuclear fire and magnetic storms. Navigation. Officer Kim Tae-young counted down the distance to the deployment point, 50,000 kilometers. "And closing, sir. The automated defenses are starting to scan our area. We need to deploy the weapon in the next 10 minutes. Captain Han Ji-woo gave the order. Dr. Nam Yu-jin activate the deployment sequence. In the cargo bay, the weapon pod was loaded into the launch tube. The exotic matter core hummed with barely contained energy that could reshape the laws of physics. The pod's guidance system locked onto the star's magnetic field lines and prepared to ride them into the corona. Engineer Nam Yu-jin watched the status displays with sweat on her forehead. Everything looked normal, but she knew that once the weapon was deployed, there would be no way to stop what came next. The star would die, and billions of Vorth would die with it. A Vorth defense platform suddenly appeared on their sensors, firing energy beams in all directions. The aliens had detected something, but they did not know exactly where the threat was coming from. The Phantom shook as an energy beam passed within meters of the hull deploy. "Now," Captain Han Ji-woo shouted. Dr. Nam Yu-jin pressed the launch button. The weapon pod shot out of the Phantom and streaked toward the star's surface. Its small engine burned bright against the darkness as it accelerated toward its target. The exotic matter would reach the corona in less than 5 minutes. The Phantom immediately began its escape run. Captain Han Ji-woo ordered maximum power to the engines as Vorth ships converged on their position. The stealth systems were failing under the stress of high-speed maneuvering, and enemy sensors were starting to detect them. Pilot Lee Min-jae pushed the ship's engines beyond their safety limits as energy beams filled the space around them. One blast struck the Phantom's rear section, causing explosions throughout the ship, but they kept flying. The weapon was deployed, and that was all that mattered. Dr. Nam Yu-jin watched her instruments as the exotic matter pod reached the star's corona. The readings showed successful penetration into the stellar material. The chain reaction would begin in minutes, and nothing could stop it now. The Vorth star was already starting to die. Lieutenant Colonel Oh-hai-1 reported that 3 of her Marines had been killed when the energy beam hit their section, but the rest of her squad was still fighting fires and repairing damage. Everyone knew they were probably going to die, but they had completed their mission. The Phantom raced toward the edge of the system as more Vorth ships joined the chase. Captain Han Ji-woo knew they could not outfight the enemy fleet, but they might be able to outrun them. The hyperspace drive was charging, but it would take several more minutes to be ready. Behind them, the star began to flicker as the exotic matter spread through its core. The nuclear fusion that had burned for billions of years was being disrupted by forces that existed outside normal space and time. The Vorth homeworld would soon learn what it meant to murder human children. Communication officer Yoon Sang-ho picked up frantic transmissions from Vorth Command. They were trying to understand what was happening to their star, but their scientists had never seen anything like it. The exotic matter was beyond their comprehension. The hyperspace drive finally came online just as the star began its final collapse. Captain Han Ji-woo ordered the jump to hyperspace. As the stellar explosion started behind them, the Phantom vanished into faster-than-light travel, carrying news of humanity's terrible vengeance back to Earth. The message from New Harmony reached Earth 3 months after the massacre. Admiral Cho Kyung-min was drinking his morning tea in his office when the communication came through. He read the transmission twice before his hands started shaking with rage. Communication officer Yoon Tae-min had managed to send just enough information before he died. The aliens called themselves the Vorth Empire. They had given the colonists 1 day to leave, then killed everyone, including the children. The message was short, but it painted a clear picture of cold-blooded murder. Admiral Cho Kyung-min walked quickly through the halls of Earth Command toward the emergency meeting room. His boots clicked loudly on the metal floor as other officers joined him. Everyone had the same look of shock and anger on their faces. The news was spreading through the building like wildfire. President Yoon Soo-jin sat at the head of the long table in the conference room. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady and strong as she spoke to the assembled leaders. The colony of New Harmony has been completely destroyed. 237 innocent people have been murdered by aliens who call themselves the Vorth General. Bae Tae-hyun slammed his fist on the table hard enough to make the water glasses jump. They killed children, Madam President. They murdered families who were just trying to build a better life. This cannot stand. The room fell silent as President Yoon Soo-jin stood up and walked to the large window that looked out over the capital city. Millions of people lived in the buildings below, going about their daily lives without knowing that humanity had just suffered its worst tragedy. For the first time in our history, humans have been the victims of genocide, the president said quietly. The Vorth Empire thinks they can kill our people and scare us into submission. They think we are weak because we choose peace over war. They are about to learn how wrong they are. Defense. Minister Park Jae-won opened a thick folder full of classified documents. Madam President, we have been working on a secret weapon for the past 20 years. It was designed as a last resort in case Earth ever faced an extinction-level threat. Believe this situation qualifies. What kind of weapon? Admiral Cho Kyung-min asked. The stellar cascade generator Park Jae-won replied. It can cause a star to collapse and explode, destroying everything in the solar system. The weapon has never been tested on a real star, but our computer models show it should work. President Yoon Soo-jin turned back to face the room full of military leaders and government officials. You are talking about killing billions of alien civilians. Many of them, probably, do not even know what their military did to our colony. General Bae Tae-hyun stood up from his chair. Madam President, the Vorth showed no mercy to our civilians. They did not care that Dr. Park So-young was a scientist who spent her life growing food. They did not care that Captain Lee Dong-woo was protecting children. They killed everyone without hesitation. The president walked back to her seat and sat down heavily. The weight of the decision was crushing, but she knew what had to be done. The EEO message we send to the galaxy will be clear. Humanity is peaceful, but we are not defenseless. Anyone who commits genocide against our people will face total annihilation. Within hours, the entire human military machine was mobilizing for war shipyards that had been building cargo vessels were converted to produce warships. Factories that made farming equipment started making weapons. Scientists who had spent their careers studying peaceful technologies were now designing instruments of destruction. Dar. Nam Yu-jin was one of the scientists working on the stellar cascade generator. She had been part of the original research team 20 years ago, when the project was just a theoretical possibility. Now she was racing against time to build a working version of the weapon. The device was smaller than most people expected, about the size of a large refrigerator, but it contained exotic matter that could tear apart the fabric of space itself. The hardest part was keeping the exotic matter stable until it reached its target. One small mistake would cause the weapon to explode and take half of Earth with it. Admiral Cho Kyung-min was given command of the mission to deliver the weapon to the Vorth home system. He selected his best officers and crew members for what everyone knew would be a one-way trip. The stealth ship Phantom was chosen to carry the weapon, because it was the only vessel that might be able to penetrate the Vorth defenses. Captain Han Ji-woo was picked to command the Phantom. He was known for his calm nerves and brilliant tactical mind. If anyone could get the weapon to its target, it would be him. His crew was made up entirely of volunteers who had lost family or friends in the New Harmony massacre engineer. Nam Yu-jin would accompany the mission to make sure the weapon worked properly. She had never been on a military ship before, but she was determined to see her creation fulfill its deadly purpose. The exotic matter had to be calibrated perfectly, or the star would not collapse. Lieutenant Colonel Oh Hai-won led the Marine unit that would protect the weapon during the mission. Her soldiers were all veterans who had trained for impossible situations. They knew they were probably going to die, but they were ready to sacrifice everything for justice. The Phantom was modified with the most advanced stealth technology Earth had ever developed. The ship could bend light around itself, making it almost invisible to enemy sensors. It also had the fastest hyperspace drive ever built, so it could escape the system after deploying the weapon. General Bae Tae-hyun briefed the crew on their mission in a secure hangar bay. The Vorth home system has 5 planets and billions of inhabitants. Their military is based on the second planet from their sun. Their capital city has over 50 million aliens living in it. Captain Han Ji-woo studied the star charts and defensive positions. The Vorth had built their civilization around their star for thousands of years. They had space stations, mining facilities, and patrol fleets throughout the system. They would never expect an attack on the star itself. The weapon has to be deployed within the star's corona. Dr. Nam Yu-jin explained to the crew. The exotic matter will spread through the fusion reaction like a virus. Once it reaches critical mass, the star will collapse in less than an hour. President Yoon Soo-jin visited the crew the night before their departure. She shook hands with each person and thanked them for their service. "You are not just avenging New Harmony," she told them. "You are showing the galaxy that humanity will not be victims." The launch took place in complete secrecy at a military base on the far side of the moon. Only a few dozen people knew about the mission. The Phantom slipped away into the darkness of space, carrying Earth's terrible answer to the Vorth Empire. As the ship jumped into hyperspace, President Yoon Soo-jin stood in her office looking up at first stars. She thought about the children who had died on New Harmony and the families who would never see their loved ones again. The Vorth had started this war by murdering innocents. Now they would learn what human justice looked like. The black ships came from the dark side of the planet like giant metal birds with no wings. Captain Lee Dong-woo was eating breakfast with his family when the alarm bells started ringing across New Harmony. He dropped his coffee cup and ran outside to see 5 massive alien vessels hanging in the sky above their settlement. The ships were bigger than anything the humans had ever built. Each one was the size of a city block, and they moved without making any sound. Their hulls were smooth and dark like black mirrors that reflected the morning sunlight. The air around them seemed to bend and twist in strange ways. Commander Kim Min-ho was already at the defense center when Lee Dong-woo arrived. His fingers moved quickly over the control panels as he tried to activate their weapon systems. The plasma cannons were powering up, but they looked like toys compared to the alien ships floating above them. "Captain, we're getting a transmission from the lead ship," Kim Min-ho said with worry in his voice. "Put it on the main speaker," Lee Dong-woo ordered as he watched more colonists running toward the emergency shelters. A cold mechanical voice filled the room, speaking perfect human language. "We are the Vorth Empire. You have built your settlement in our territory. This world belongs to us. You have one day to leave this planet or you will be destroyed. Li Dongwu grabbed the communication microphone with shaking hands. We are peaceful colonists. We have lived here for 15 years. We wish to discuss this matter and find a solution that works for everyone. The alien voice replied immediately. There is nothing to discuss. You are insects that have infested our property. You will leave or you will die. The communication ended with a sharp electronic sound. Li Dongwu and Kim Min-ho looked at each other with fear in their eyes. Neither man had ever heard such cold hatred in a voice before. The aliens spoke about killing humans the way someone might talk about removing weeds. From a garden, Dr. Park, So Young burst into the control room with dirt on her clothes and panic in her eyes. Captain, they destroyed my research station near the river. They fired some kind of energy beam and turned everything to ash. My 10 years of work is gone. Li Dongwu felt his heart sink. The aliens were not waiting for the deadline, they were already attacking. He grabbed the colony-wide communication system and spoke to all the colonists. Attention, everyone, this is Captain Li Dongwu. We are under attack by hostile aliens. All civilians must go to the underground shelters immediately. Across the settlement, people were running in every direction. Parents carried crying children, while older colonists helped each other toward the concrete bunkers that had been built for emergencies. The schoolteacher Nam Hee-jin was leading her students in a line toward the nearest shelter when the sky lit up with green fire. The alien weapons made no sound when they fired, but their energy beams turned everything they touched into burning plasma. The first shots hit the communication tower and the main power station. Explosions sent chunks of metal flying through the air like deadly rain. Commander Kim Min-ho fired the plasma cannons at the nearest alien ship. The bright blue beams struck the black hull but did no damage at all. The alien vessel did not even seem to notice the attack. It continued floating in the sky like a dark cloud of death. Li Dongwu ran toward the school building where some children were still trapped inside. The building was shaking from nearby explosions and smoke was pouring from the windows. He could hear Nam Hee-jin calling for help from inside. The captain kicked down the damaged door and found the teacher trying to move a heavy beam that had fallen across the exit. 6 young children were trapped behind the debris. Their faces were covered with dust and tears, but they were still alive. Help me move this, Li Dongwu shouted as he grabbed one end of the metal beam. Nam Hee-jin took the other end and together they lifted it just enough for the children to crawl underneath. Get to the shelter now, Li Dongwu told them as another explosion shook the building. The children ran outside, toward the underground bunkers while Nam Hee-jin helped the last student to safety. An energy beam struck the school building just as Li Dongwu and the teacher reached the door. The blast threw them both to the ground and set the roof on fire. The captain felt sharp pain in his back, but he forced himself to stand up and keep moving. Dr. Park, So Young was at the medical shelter trying to help injured colonists when the aliens began their final attack. The Vorth ships moved lower in the sky and started firing at the underground bunkers. The concrete walls that were supposed to protect the colonists cracked and crumbled under the alien weapons. The doctor saw communication officer Yoon Tae-min trying to send a message to Earth. His hands were bleeding and his communication equipment was badly damaged. But he kept working even as the building shook around him. I got through to Earth, Command Yoon Tae-min shouted over the noise of explosions. I told them what happened here. I told them about the Vorthon energy beam cut through the communication center wall and turned Yoon Tae-min into ash before he could say another word. Dr. Park. So Young screamed and tried to reach him, but another blast knocked her unconscious. Commander Kim Min-ho made his last stand at the weapon control center. He fired every missile and energy beam the colony had at the alien ships, but nothing could hurt them. The Vorth vessels were too advanced and too powerful. The human weapons were useless. The commander activated the self-destruct system for the defense center. He would not let the aliens capture their equipment or learn about human technology. The explosion was huge, but it only managed to damage one small part of one alien ship captain. Li Dongwu found himself trapped in the burning remains of the school building. He could hear children crying somewhere in the smoke, but he could not reach them. A heavy piece of ceiling had pinned his legs to the floor and he could not move. The last thing he saw was little Park Jin-ae running past the window. She was calling for her mother, but another child was pulling her toward the shelters. The captain tried to shout a warning, but his voice was too weak. She was too far away. An energy beam struck the shelter entrance just as the children reached it. The explosion was so bright that Lee Dong-woo had to close his eyes. When he opened them again, there was nothing left but a smoking crater in the ground. The massacre lasted exactly 3 hours and 17 minutes. When it was over, New Harmony looked like the surface of a dead moon. The green fields were black ash, the buildings were melted metal and broken concrete. The research stations were empty holes in the ground. 137 human beings had lived on New Harmony that morning. By sunset, not one was left alive. The Vorth had killed them all without mercy or hesitation. Men, women, children, and babies had all died the same way, turned to dust by alien energy weapons. The alien ships hovered over the dead colony for another hour, making sure they had destroyed everything. Then they began broadcasting their victory across space. They sent images of the burning settlement to other worlds as a warning. This is what happens to those who enter Vorth territory. As the black ships prepared to leave, they fired one final barrage at the planet's surface. The energy beams dug deep craters where the human farms had been. They burned the forests where Earth, animals had been living. They boiled the rivers where human children had played. When the Vorth fleet finally departed, New Harmony was a world of ash and death. The only sound was the wind blowing through the ruins of human dreams. The only movement was smoke rising from the graves of a peaceful people who had never hurt anyone. The morning sun rose over New Harmony like a giant orange ball in the purple sky. Captain Lee Dong-woo stood on the metal platform outside the main building and watched the light spread across the valley below him. The air smelled sweet from the earth flowers that his people had planted in neat rows across the hillsides 15 years ago. This place had been nothing but rocks and dust. Now it looked like a piece of earth had been dropped onto an alien world. Children ran between the green plants, laughing and playing games they had invented themselves. These kids had never seen the blue skies of Earth, but they were human through and through. Lee Dong-woo smiled as he watched little Park Jin-hee chase her brother through the cornstalks. The corn grew twice as tall here as it did on Earth, thanks to the work of their best scientist, Dr. Park. So young, she had spent 10 years learning how to make earth plants grow in alien soil. Her research stations were scattered all over the colony, like white dots on green carpet. The captain walked down the metal steps and headed toward the center of the settlement. The buildings were simple but strong, made from materials they had brought from Earth and metals they had found in the local mountains. Everything was built to last because they knew no supply ships would come for years. Commander Kim Min-ho jogged past him wearing his morning exercise clothes. The commander led their small defense team, though they had never faced any real danger. The most exciting thing that had happened was when a pack of six-legged wolf creatures had wandered too close to the farms last winter. They had scared them away with loud noises and bright lights. The colony had 230, 7 people counting the 15 babies who had been born in the last 2 years. Everyone knew everyone else. They shared meals together, celebrated birthdays together, and helped each other when problems came up. It was like living in a small town, where everyone was family. Dr. Park. So Young was already working in her main laboratory when Lee Dong-woo arrived to check on her morning progress. She looked up from her microscope with tired eyes, but a happy smile on her face. Her long black hair was tied back and her white lab coat had dirt stains from working in the fields. "Doctor, we need to talk about expanding the northern farm section," Lee Dong-woo said, as he sat down on a metal stool next to her work table. She nodded and pulled out a thick folder full of papers and photographs. "I've been studying the soil samples from that area for 3 months. The mineral content is perfect for growing rice. We could feed twice as many people if we expand there." The captain looked at her. Research photos which showed healthy green plants growing in neat rows under the alien sun. These people had turned a dead world into a garden. They had created something beautiful from nothing but determination and hard work. "What about water supply?" Lee Dong-woo asked. "There is an underground river that runs right through that area, Dr. Park." So Young replied. "We would need to dig some wells, but the water is clean and safe. I tested it myself." Lee Dong-woo stood up and walked to the laboratory window that looked out over their settlement. Children were walking to the school building carrying books and lunchboxes made from Earth. The school teacher, Nam Hyejin, was already outside waiting for them with a warm smile. The captain felt proud when he looked at their community. They had built something special here. The colonists had not just survived on this alien world, they had made it their home. They grew their own food, built their own houses, and raised their children with love and hope. Soft beeping sound came from the communication center in the next room. Lee Dong-woo walked over to check the daily message from Earth. The messages took 3 months to travel between the planets, so news was always old. But the colonists looked forward to hearing from Home Communication Officer Yoon Tae-min, was sitting at his desk reading the latest transmission from Earth Command. His face looked concerned as he studied the text on his screen. Captain, "We have an unusual message here, Yoon," Tae-min said without looking up from his work. "What kind of unusual?" Lee Dong-woo asked as he moved closer to read over the officer's shoulder. "It is a warning about alien ship movements in our sector. Earth Command says they detected some unknown vessels about 2 light years from our position. The ships do not respond to communication attempts." Lee Dong-woo felt his stomach tighten with worry. The colonists had never encountered hostile aliens in all their years on New Harmony. The nearest known alien civilization was supposed to be peaceful traders who lived many light years away. "How old is this message?" the captain asked. "About 4 months old, Sir," Yoon Tae-min replied. "That means if those ships were heading toward our system, they could already be here." Lee Dong-woo walked back to the window and looked up at the clear purple sky. He could see 3 of the system's 4 moons hanging like white stones against the morning light. Everything looked peaceful and normal, but something felt different now. The captain decided not to worry the colonists until he knew more. He told Yoon Tae-min to monitor all communication channels and to let him know immediately if any ships were detected in their system. Then he went to find Commander Kim Min-ho. He found the commander in the exercise building lifting heavy weights and sweating from his workout. Kim Min-ho was a big man with thick arms and a serious face. He had served in Earth military for 20 years before joining the colony. "Mission Commander, we may have a situation," Lee Dong-woo said quietly, so the other people exercising could not hear them. Kim Min-ho set down his weights and wiped sweat from his forehead with a white towel. "What kind of situation, Captain?" "Unknown alien. Ships were detected in our area several months ago. They might be heading this way." The commander's face became more serious. "We should check our defense systems and make sure everything is working properly. We have not used most of our equipment in over a year." Lee Dong-woo nodded in agreement. Their defense systems were basic, but they had some plasma cannons that could destroy small ships. They also had personal weapons for every adult colonist, though most people had never fired them except during practice sessions. The 2 men walked outside together and headed toward the defense control building. It was a small concrete structure built into the hillside for protection. Inside were computers that monitored the space around their planet and controlled their defensive weapons. Everything looked normal on the scanning screens. No ships were detected anywhere in their solar system. The automated systems had been watching the sky for 15 years without finding any threats. "Maybe the Yaoi ships went somewhere else," Kim Min-ho suggested as he checked the weapon status displays. Lee Dong-woo hoped he was right, but something in his gut told him to be ready for trouble. He decided to call a meeting with the colony leaders that evening. They would discuss the situation and make plans just in case. For now, life would continue as normal. Children would go to school, farmers would tend their crops, and scientists would work on their research. But Lee Dong-woo could not shake the feeling that their peaceful days on New Harmony were about to end.